Well, hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. It's the Saturday stream edition. No stream tomorrow because tomorrow is a holiday for many people. It is Super Bowl Sunday, and so I thought on this pre-Super Bowl Saturday, it would only be appropriate to talk about the music of the NFL because unlike many sports leagues, professional or otherwise, the NFL has not only an in-house film studio but an in-house music library of compositions that they commission. And I really enjoy those compositions. Many of you out there have probably heard them and are intimately familiar with them. And I'm itching like crazy. So anyway, let's get right to it. So the NFL as a league dates back to the early 1920s, but for its first sort of few decades around, it was always sort of the bastard stepchild to the most popular North American sport, baseball. But then something happened in the middle of the 20th century, and that thing was called television because the shape of the football field in the NFL is very, very TV friendly. It's all about right angles that fit very neatly into the, at least the old fashioned aspect ratio of a television set, which was a 1:3:3 aspect ratio. Remember the old square televisions before the 16 by 9 widescreens? I'm sure you do. And welcome, of course, to our younger listeners who don't know what on earth I'm talking about. We shall, of course, clarify as we persevere. So, as television became a common feature in the North American household in the 1950s, so too did the popularity of football grow. And it was at the end of the 50s, in 1958, that the championship game between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants became a widely viewed television event. The game went down to the wire. Johnny Unitas orchestrated a game-winning drive for the Colts, and the rest is history. Now, at that time, various film production companies would gain the rights to film various NFL games. Not every game was filmed at that time, but of course, many of them were, and of course, all of the championship games were. In 1962, the fate of film and NFL would become intertwined when a company was formed that was originally known as Blair Motion Pictures, not a very exciting name. But the founder of this company, Ed Sable, and his young son, Steve, had a passion for professional football. And they started filming the games. And they filmed one of the championship games in 62. And the NFL really, really liked the results. And so they decided to just buy out this film production company, incorporate it into the NFL. So it became a division of the NFL, corporate in terms of its corporate relationship, but it really maintained its artistic integrity and independence under the father and son team of Ed and Steve Sable. They had a very clear vision for what they wanted to do. And NFL Films is credited by many with helping the sport to become the most popular in the US by the end of the 1960s, and its popularity would continue to grow throughout the 70s. Now, even though it's called NFL Films, the place that most people saw these films was not in a movie theater or cinema, but in the home on television. They produced television specials, some that aired locally, and these would be ones that focused on a specific team's yearbook, and some that would feature nationally, such as a season in review, something about a championship game, later a Super Bowl, when those got invented in 67, and so forth and so on. And the reason, though, it is called films is because all of the games that they shot were filmed either on 16 millimeter or the more important games on 35 millimeter film, which gave them a very professional, serious look, and which, in the age of high definition digital video, is a very good way of archiving these games because you can transfer 35 millimeter film to 4K. It looks beautiful because, of course, before very recent years, comparatively, film was much higher resolution than any video format. And so these films are quite timeless in that sense. But it wasn't just the fact that they shot on film. the way that they shot, the camera angles, the edits, the direction. There were a lot of close ups. There were a lot of interesting angles. It wasn't just it was very different, in other words, than your standard television broadcast of an NFL game, where it's just a very horizontal thing and it's all about, perception of the field. So you can say, okay, well, right, it's 6 yards to a first down and, going to count the hash marks and all that. This was much more about visual poetry than it was about anything else. Think sort of if Orson Welles or Leni Riefenstahl or what's the 8 millimeter guy? It will come to me. I have to look this up now. Fellini. And those sorts of artistic types, if they were to, like football, and I don't know, certainly the two Europeans of them probably didn't like professional NFL football. Orson Welles, he looked like he could be an offensive lineman, so you never know. But it was really high art. And it elevated the sport into something that was really filled with drama for the viewer at home who didn't necessarily live in a market where you could see a lot of games live or wasn't able to attend the games in person. It really, I mean, it's a dramatic sport anyway, but it really increased that drama. And of course, part of the reason for it was not only the high quality of production, the interesting camera angles and edits, but the music that went along with it, because for each of their films, they would commission music. And that music would cycle throughout the season because people enjoyed the familiarity of it, but there would be new music introduced every season as well. Now, several composers in the early days and quite a few more in the later days of NFL films were used, but a man who was there from the beginning and composed some of the most endearing and popular NFL films scores was a composer called Sam Spence. And I think that just as much as any of the cameramen, he is owed a huge debt of gratitude for the people who love NFL films and love the drama of it. Now, there's quite a few playlists on Spotify that have his music. In I think 2004, they released an album, a box set really, called Autumn Thunder, which contained just about every piece of music that appeared in an NFL film from their inception up to that time. And let's just, to make your life easier, let's just type in NFL films into Spotify and see what we get. Okay, quite a few playlists. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I mean, I have my own playlist, but yeah, let's see. Yep, some really good stuff. So, what I would recommend, because obviously, in terms of the indexing system on Spotify, some of it will be listed under NFL, some will be listed under Sam Spence, that's Spence, and some will be listed by some of the other composers that were involved in this. But if you type in NFL films, you'll see a lot of playlists that have a lot of this great music, and you can then just take it from there. So in a roundabout way, even though Autumn Thunder, this box set, which should be on Spotify, isn't, a lot of individual albums are on there. David Robidoux, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is a composer and conductor of a lot of other great music for NFL films. So definitely check that out. Now, let's talk about Sam Spence's composition style, because it's I would say it's sort of classic orchestral Americana. So a lot of brass and woodwinds, a lot of percussion. It's very sort of cinematic, and a lot of it is inspired by film music. Some say that Sam Spence isn't original enough, but I really disagree. His original melodies, I think, are amazing, and they truly are originals. And then the stuff that sort of references existing music, whether it's classical music, whether it's music from the cinema, I think that it's a great sort of homage. The quotes that he uses are really good. Hold on, I just need to write a message to someone who's interrupting me. Just give me a second. Okay, I don't know why people always write to me in the middle of this. I can sit around all day just having a nice, relaxing Saturday. No one write, and then the minute I come home, people start bothering me, and I have to tell them to stop bothering me because it makes the little thingy click. in the side of the screen. Does that happen to you? Let me know in the comments. So anyway, Sam Spence. Have I been calling him Smith all this time? Who cares? Sam Spence, wonderful, wonderful composer. And like I said, that classic style of Americana. I think he struck the perfect balance between quoting other people's music and composing original sort of leitmotifs. Some of the music is really, really stirring and beautiful. Some of it is very exciting. Some of it is fun. And in that sort of tradition of writing to visual, it has to incorporate all of those different emotions and convey them through the composition, because you can have moments of humor when someone slips and fumbles. You can have a 2-minute drill where someone wins at the last minute after coming from behind. You can have a story about a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl at the end of his career and then goes off into the sunset and retires. All of these themes that are common to sort of the human story that we have seen in dramatic cinema, they are all there in NFL films, and the music really makes it go perfectly. I mean, one of Sam Smith's, why do I keep calling him that? One of Sam Spence's best compositions, in my view, is called The Raiders. And it's about the team. And the team has used it ever since the mid 70s, when that was composed as their theme in their stadiums. Now, one of the things that's very interesting is that not only is there music that accompanies the NFL, but there is narration. And some of these playlists that I've sort of turned you on to, if you will, on Spotify will contain that narration because it went with the music so well. And the greatest of all the NFL films narrators, someone who I would say accomplished this trifecta of making it successful. So, one, to recap, we've got the actual fact that it is high quality film with really interesting edits, great camera angles, unusual ones, artistic ones. That's sort of point one that made NFL films important. Point two is the music. People like Sam Spence and the other composers really created such memorable soundtracks for the NFL. And then I would say point three is the voice of John Facenda, because John Facenda was someone whose voice, one of the finest narration voices in the genre. There have been other good ones, but I would say that he and Orson Welles are probably the finest narrators ever. And so far as I can tell, Orson never actually narrated an NFL film soundtrack. You'll instantly know his voice when you hear it. I mean, I can try to do an impersonation. It was an autumn day in winter. I mean, I can't do it, but it's that dramatic. You know it instantly. He was a guy who was even before NFL films, he was very popular and well known in the Philadelphia area, both for his radio work and his television news announcing. And he just sort of took to NFL films like a fish to water. It was absolutely great stuff. Now, luckily, you can see a lot of these older films online because some people have unofficially uploaded them to YouTube, and some of them are even making their way onto some of the many of the NFL's official YouTube pages. For the music, Spotify is probably your best bet because a lot of people have taken the difficultly labeled, I'll put it that way, albums and singles that are floating around on Spotify's database, and they've put them into some nice lists. I can just read to you some of my favorite music. There's A Chilling Championship and The Raiders, both by Sam Spence. There's The Magnificent 11, Game Plan for Sudden Death, A Golden Boy Again, The Bomb Squad, West Side Rumble, The 75 Seasons String Overture Suite, A New Game, Road to Victory, Turning Point, Air Attack, Glory Day in Green Bay, Forearm Shiver, To Catch the Wind, The Over the Hill Gang, Ramblin' Man from Gramblin'. And these are just, if you see these titles, those are just some of my favorite compositions, both from Spence and his fellow NFL Films composers out there. Now, NFL Films has been successful beyond the wildest dreams of the people that found it. It dominated television with these super well produced and well narrated specials throughout the 60s and 70s. And by the end of the 70s, it really became even more successful because of the advent of cable television and Inside the NFL, a show that HBO ran for decades. And this was an hour-long weekly recap of all of the NFL games. I think it usually aired, correct me if I'm wrong out there, but I think that it was usually on air on a Thursday. Um, and it was just a great pastiche of everything that NFL Films had done during that week. It had the music, it had the narration, it had the editing. And I don't know of any, certainly no sports league at the time when NFL Films was conceived, was doing anything remotely close to this. And I don't know if any sports league anywhere in the world ever really did. I mean, a lot of people copied what NFL Films did because it was so sort of artistically irresistible and commercially successful, but no one really was ever to replicate it in any real sense. And so, in many ways, it stands alone. Now, Steve Sabol unfortunately died at what was, I think, too young an age. It was in 2012. He was only 69, which in some ways is old, but in other ways is quite young. And that really sort of changed NFL Films forever because it was he and his father who actually outlived him. His father died in 2015. It was the vision of the two Sabols, father and son, that really gave NFL Films its identity. It was that two-man crew in the early days. And then you had, the crews obviously got bigger, extra cameramen, sound men, the composers, the editors, but it was a surprisingly small and nimble group of people. Now, in addition to the very sad, I would say, too young death of Steve Sabol, other things have changed as well. In an age of the internet, we don't really have that desire to wait and see what comes next. And NFL, in terms of recapping the games of yore, whether it's the previous week or the previous season, we can rewind in real time. Anyone, anywhere can watch the games. You've got so many people clipping the edits and the highlights in real time on X and other social media platforms. But NFL Films was a real survivor because as more and more NFL games were televised in ever-growing television markets, they were not only retaining their popularity at that time, but expanding their popularity. And even when ESPN came and you had Chris Berman recapping everything on a Sunday afternoon, he could go all the way, that guy. NFL Films and HBO airing so much of their content, others aired it too, including ESPN, it remained really successful. But it seems that the death of Steve Sabol and the age of sports commentary and editing and edits and highlights on social media, it seems to have been a kind of not death knell, but NFL Films is less popular than it once was. They've changed their editing style to make it a bit more about realism and a bit less about sort of dramatic narrative with interesting camera angles. And a few years ago, I would say it was within the last decade. Let me see if I can look this up. When they actually stopped using 16 and 35 millimeter film and went to high definition digital. So let me look this up and see what we get. Because that has also changed the look of NFL Films. The fact that it was filmed. Oh, okay, so according to my research that I've done just now, it was 2014 when they made the switch to digital. So that's 11 years ago. Feels like recent history in terms of the overall history of the NFL. And that has definitely changed the look because, well, every major Hollywood movie is now filmed digitally, usually on 4K. Some of the interesting effect scenes done on 8K, which, takes up a lot more space. But it looks different. Film has a certain look to it. And even though the digital video formats that we have today at a professional level are wonderful, they really do these days look good. When I remember when 2K first came out, I was like, film is much better. But with the 4 and 8K and with the improved sensors and the modern cameras, the digital stuff does look absolutely fantastic at any size. But film will always have a certain look. And no matter how much you try to sort of replicate that in the digital realm, it will always remain something that is unique. So I think the combination of people losing patience and wanting their edits and highlights instantly, which also meant less interest in this sort of artistic, visually poetic style of filmmaking, the end of film and the transition to digital, and the death of the man whose mind gave birth to everything NFL films became great at. It definitely signaled a kind of decline, but NFL films will always be there and it will always be important because the NFL is probably the most media savvy sports league in history. And having this in house set of archives and this in house set of camera crews, multiple camera crews, and editors and musicians, it really did help and does help the league to really do an end around, that's a reference, of the media market. And so NFL films will always be important. But I think that one of the lasting messages of it is that it was one of the factors, along with television, along with the increased precision and professionalism in the sport decade upon decade, that turned it into the most popular sport in North America, certainly in the US. And a sport that is in the 21st century conquering much of the world. I think NFL Films is owed a lot of credit, and the musician Sam Spence in particular is owed so much credit for giving it a sound. I mean, so many morning radio stations would use the Sam Spence and other composers of the NFL films. They would use their music as bumper music. You can still hear it today in parodies. You know, when you would have you've had commercials where people with the John Facenda style voice narrating a mundane activity, like going to the shower, and he walks down the hallway, and you have the Sam Spence music blazing, and it's just so memorable. Even if you don't like the sport, you out there in the audience have almost certainly somewhere heard some of this music and could hum it to yourself, if so inspired to do so. And again, memory retention is one good way of measuring how important and how interesting a piece of music is. And Sam Spence's music really passes that test, I believe, in flying colors, as do the other great composers who contributed to the wonderful sound of NFL films and really the sound of the NFL as a whole. So I know what I'm going to do for the next 24 hours. I'm going to be going on Spotify and listening to all of this music, getting ready for the big day tomorrow. No stream tomorrow, but there will be a review of all of the entertainment at the Super Bowl on Monday, and maybe a bit about the game too. Who do you think is going to win? Do you think it's rigged? So funny that we're allowed to talk about rigged NFL games. I don't think they're rigged. We're not allowed to talk about other things that are rigged. Isn't that interesting, boys and girls? Anyway, as always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.